Okay, so let's look at the bones of the appendicular system. Let's start with the pectoral girdle. This is the scapula, the shoulder blade. This is anterior, posterior. And this is the clavicle, or the shoulder, the collarbone. And so they're going to go together, something, let's see, let me try to get it the correct way. And so this is going to go up and meet the sternum, so it's going to sit something like that. And so, of course, this would be the front. Okay, this would be anterior. The humerus would fit in there, and it's going to fit kind of like that. Okay, so we have the scapula. If we look on the posterior side of the scapula, we see this nice, significant spine. Above the spine, we have a fossa, which is the supraspinous fossa. Below the spine, we have the infraspinous fossa. The spine, I always say to myself, ends as the acromion process. And if I turn it over to the front side, I have this nice process. I always had problems naming that to begin with, and so finally when I started looking at it, I thought, well, it kind of looks like a bird or a crow, and so now I remember that this is the coracoid process. This is the glenoid cavity, and it is the socket for our ball and socket of our humerus. So this is the scapula. It's part of the pectoral girdle, and this is the collarbone or the clavicle. And it's this flattened end that's going to attach to the scapula. It's this broader end that's going to go to the sternum. So those are the two parts to the pectoral girdle. So now let's talk about the humerus. So the humerus is the upper arm bone. And your first problem is which is the front and which is the back, or anterior and posterior. The key to knowing is going to be looking at the distal end. The end that has the deeper depression is the back of the humerus, and the one that has the one that's not so deep is the anterior. Because this is where the elbow and the extended arm, where the ulna will go to make the elbow. So I know that this is the back of my humerus, and this is the front of my humerus. So let me go and start at the head. So this is the head of the humerus. It sits on a small neck. These two round processes are turbicules. So this is the greater turbicule and the lesser turbicule. And in between is the intertrabecular notch or groove, or sometimes sulcus. When I go down my bone, I come to a large roughened spot. That's called the deltoid tuberosity. Tuberosity is a roughened place, and if you can imagine the big deltoid muscle coming down and attaching to that spot. When we go further down, we see the distal end of the humerus. We see this sharpened edge and one that is more rounded. The rounded one is going to articulate with the head of the radius. It's almost like we're putting a cap on this flat head. So that's the capitulum. And then this one that is more sharp is going to attach to the trochlear notch of the ulna and is called the trochlea. The back of the elbow is called the olecranon. So this is the olecranon fossa. And then the front of the elbow always messed me up. And so I started thinking, well, it's not the coracoid of the scapula. It's not. So it must be the coronoid fossa. And that is the anterior structure of the humerus. So now we have the lower arms, which are the radius and the ulna. The radius is the only bone that has a flat head. And at the distal end, you see a styloid process, which will help stabilize the wrist. The ulna, which is going to make the elbow, kind of looks like a wrench to me. This is the trochlear or semilunar notch. And at the other end, you see another stick sticking off, and that would be the other styloid process. So let me see if I can hold them together, kind of the way they appear in the body, and then put my hand, and notice that those styloid processes help to stabilize the wrist. This is the radius. It's always going to be with the thumb, so make sure you have the right hand when you get started. So let's look at the bones of the hand. I always like to turn the hand around and hold it in mine so I can kind of get an idea. These are the carpals, and we're going to look at them individually in a moment. These are the metacarpals, and then these are the phalanges. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 phalanges. One is a phalanx. That would be distal and proximal phalanx. And then on the other fingers you have one in the middle, so it would be intermediate. So let's go back to those carpals and see if we can name them. We're going to start over here, medial, and we're going to start with this bone that's kind of sitting on top of the other bone. It's the pisiform. Pisiform, triquetral, lunate, scaphoid, trapezium, trapezoid, captate, hamate. I always end with that little bone that's called the hamate bone, but it starts with the one that sits on top of the other one, pisiform, triquetral, lunate, scaphoid, trapezium, trapezoid, captate, hamate. And you're probably saying, well, how did you remember that? Well, there's a kind of risque little saying that I didn't come up with, but somebody told me, and it helps me to learn it. If you start here and you go in a counterclockwise fashion, you can remember physical, therapist, love, sex, till, they, catch, herpes. And that gives you the carpal bones in a counterclockwise manner, starting with this pisiform that you can actually palpate on your own wrist. And so those are the bones of the upper limbs.